Co-op games have been one of the most popular genres in gaming, and that's for a good reason. There's a lot of fun to be had when fun stems not only from overcoming the obstacles that the developers have put, but also working together as a team and solving the problems of your own making. That element of chaos and the ability to create emergent narratives out of the same gameplay loop can be really addictive, but not a lot of games in the current market have been able to satisfy that itch for the long term. For most of us, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 was the game that defined this particular brand of co-op carnage last year. Players would fondly remember the familiar feeling of slashing through hordes of enemies, teammates going down at the worst possible moment, and clutching through crucial moments with nothing but a sliver of health left. And if you're looking for a new game to satisfy that very itch, well, look no further than John Carpenter's Toxic Commando. Set to release on March 12th, Toxic Commando is all about creating and maintaining the rhythm of shared carnage. The clutch revives, the desperate reloads, the last-second saves that turn into stories that you retell the next night. Space Marine 2 delivered that feeling with a sense of discipline and weight, as players had to choose between different functioning classes and play out a specific role in the heat of chaos. But if you're looking for the next obsession to simply keep your squad busy, John Carpenter's Toxic Commando might be aiming at that very same dopamine loop from a different angle. Where Space Marine 2 is controlled brutality, Toxic Commando looks like personality-driven chaos, and that contrast is exactly what makes this game worthwhile. Space Marine 2 also hit so hard because of its weight. Every step felt heavy, and every swing was purposeful. Beneath the very inviting veneer of an ultra-violent game was a movement system that was purposefully heavy, which urged players to hold their ground and build micro-level strategies about handling waves of pressure. That feeling of being purposefully heavy also extends to the feedback loop, where the sound design reinforced the fantasy of being an unstoppable war machine, with heavy weapons kicking back and enemies staggering hard to melee strikes. Even when you're sprinting into a swarm, there is a sense of mass and momentum that makes every encounter feel grounded. Then there's the co-op glue. Space Marine 2 is great at creating a state of constant pressure, with waves of enemies forcing squads to hold ground together. Priority threats demand focused fire, revives require taking risks. The game rarely allows one player to carry everything solo. Survival depends on awareness and coordination. There is a very careful balancing act as you carry out roles and responsibilities in the heat of battle, and the journey of achieving that can be really addictive. The cycle of dropping in, smashing through a mission, extracting by the skin of your teeth, and running it back rarely stops being so interesting. Space Marine 2 just understood that great co-op isn't just about kills, it's about moments. It builds encounters that escalated, peaked, and released in a rhythm that made you want another round. The missions felt authored without feeling restrictive, which meant every run had room for improvisation. That's where Toxic Commando enters the conversation. On the surface, it's a tonal opposite. Instead of gothic war chants and disciplined formations, it leans into B-movie chaos with all of the corny, over-the-top personalities proudly hanging on its sleeve. You play as a crew of misfits rather than genetically engineered super soldiers, but beneath that tonal shift lies the same formula. Survive overwhelming odds together and enjoy the roller coaster of laughs and screams along the way. If Space Marine 2 sells the fantasy of elite soldiers executing a grim campaign with precision, Toxic Commando appears to sell the fantasy of barely holding it together in a world drowning in mutant chaos. Where Space Marine 2 thrives on structure and weight, Toxic Commando seems poised to thrive on unpredictability and personality. The fun may not come solely from perfect execution, but from figuring things out on the way and improvising strategies. Now at their core though, both games share the same pillars that define great co-op shooters. And firstly, we have a combat system that starts off strong and rarely lets its foot from the gas. Toxic Commando's gameplay appears to follow a similar philosophy, and its chaotic swarms and environmental hazards are all about being mobile in large arenas. Staying still is a surefire way to get killed, so maintaining a forward sense of momentum is essential for survival. The second aspect is readable chaos. Co-op breaks down when players can't parse the battlefield. Space Marine 2 excelled at clear enemy silhouettes, obvious priority threats, and clean visual feedback. Even at peak intensity, you knew where to hit and who to hit first. Toxic Commando appears to share that same clarity, and it's a lot more important because the game thrives on runaway chaos. For co-op to feel right, players must instantly recognize danger, coordinate targets, and understand their role in the chaos. And lastly, there's the element of generating clutch stories, emergent narratives that are personal to the player. Space Marine 2 was brilliant at creating those you had to be there moments. The last magazine you emptied into a charging brute, the desperate revive while another player body blocked a swarm, or the final stand at extraction. These weren't scripted cutscenes, they were systems interacting with one another and creating dynamic stories. Toxic Commandos operates on that same pillar, so it should also produce similar stories. The element of game juice is rarely talked upon, but it silently carries the utmost impact on how the game feels to play and how enjoyable it remains on a moment-to-moment basis. Space Marine 2 set a benchmark for weight, and while Toxic Commando doesn't need to mimic that exact heaviness, it looks to be delivering that same punch in different ways. Enemy reactions, readable hit confirmation, and satisfying weapon handling should carry the same intensity to really sell the feeling of being stranded in a never-ending battle. Mission flow is equally critical to creating a great co-op game, and Space Marine 2 worked because encounters escalated with rhythm. Toxic Commando can't rely solely on throwing more enemies at players, but needs to put together varied objectives and environmental twists that keeps players engaged run after run. Progression is obviously the final piece of the puzzle. One of Space Marine 2's quiet strengths was its accessibility. You could jump right in and have fun without feeling buried under the pressure of having to unlock upgrades to have fun. Now sure, having a few upgrades enhanced the experience but didn't dampen the core thrill. Toxic Commando should take note and make efforts towards making it a game that's drop-in friendly. All of this is why the pairing makes sense. For players that have spent hours grinding through Space Marine 2's structured brutality, Toxic Commando could become the alternate game, the same thrill, but louder and lighter. Think of it as a rotation of sorts, where one week you might crave disciplined power fantasy, but the next you're soaking knee-deep in chaos and B-movie tropes. If your group loves Space Marine 2 for the tight teamwork and the high-stakes revives, Toxic Commando offers a space to test that coordination under a different kind of pressure. Instead of armored stoicism, you get frantic improvisation. For Space Marine 2 squads watching from the sidelines, there's a simple checklist to keep in mind when Toxic Commando finally lands. Does the weapon carry weight and personality? Are threats readable even in the thickest chaos? Do missions evolve beyond simple extermination? Can friends drop in without friction and immediately contribute? While there's no way for us to know that for sure right now, all signs are definitely looking pretty positive. Ultimately, the appeal isn't about replacing Space Marine 2, but rather enriching it through the luxury of choice. After all, you don't just want one experience forever, but clever spins on that same formula. You want new arenas to reestablish the same sense of camaraderie and new battlefields for the same inside jokes. Space Marine 2 proves how powerful disciplined co-op can feel when it's firing on all cylinders, and Toxic Commando appears to be chasing the same co-op dopamine loop with a different kind of chaotic flair. If it nails impact, mission variety, and time-respecting progression, it could absolutely become the next obsession for squads that loved Space Marine 2.
And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.